So you'll see a little bit of Revit being nice, hopefully, to the IFC Open BIM standard. And you can ask questions directly to Mr. Colin Dibb as a long-time IFC exponent and ArchiCAD user. No one throw anything? That's good. And now working gracefully alongside some Revit users and Revit projects and bringing it all together through IFC. I'm hoping there's people in the room who haven't heard about IFC, because one of the things for today is to expand the message and tell people about it. Anyone who hasn't heard about IFC?
I've heard of it, but don't really know.
Alright, okay, well that's good, yep. And anyone who's heard of BCF?
Not the boating.
Fine, alright. And there's not boating, camping, fishing. So, Graphisoft, they jumped on it very early on, and a lot of European BIM software has also jumped on it, mainly because of things like this. The European government's a lot more fastidious and demanding when it comes to open platforms and open systems. Unlike our sort of American and Australian cousins who don't mind being very vendor specific, which most governments are trying to shy away from that.
Can I jump in?
You can, anytime you want. We haven't rehearsed this, by the way.
I can jump in and contradict you slightly.
Oh, good, go.
The US actually have got their act together with IFC, and in that the General Services Administration, the GSA, who look after the federal building system in the US, and they look after $1 trillion worth of buildings. They demand IFC only as their submittal format. So they are kind of getting the open BIM thing, and in fact a lot of the IFC mandating that we're seeing is, in the US is coming out of universities like Penn State, but also the Institute of Architects over there has now picked it up. So they're not far behind.
That's true.
I think they're ahead now, but Europeans have traditionally been inviting to it in a big way because of the history of how it came about. But I guess you're going into the history.
A little bit. I'm not going to show the video. We haven't got time for that. But thank you, Colin. The point I guess I was making is that if you just separate the software vendors between European software and American software, the European software vendors have been a lot more IFC friendly for a lot longer. Our American vendors, yeah, exactly, have sort of come kicking and screaming because of the sort of government pushing it. They want, and GSA especially, as you said. So IFC stands for Industry Foundation Classes. It's a pretty geeky term which programmers in the room will know about, which is how you actually write programs and how you, I guess, integrate different aspects of different programs together through a common format. It doesn't mean much to anyone, except it's very confusing for Australian users who think of it as issued for construction. It's nothing to do with that, although it just happens to be for exactly the same sort of, almost the same sort of usage. But IFC is administered and now run by a firm who now you would know as Building Smart. Used to be the Association of Interoperability. They changed their name luckily to Building Smart a while ago. And they now sort of guide its development. And John Merchant in the rail over there is one, not part of Building Smart, but one of the people who are actively involved in the sort of standard setting and writing and using and knowing what's going on. Because it's an open source. So at the end of the day, for those of you who don't know about open source, it's a program protocol. All the source code's on the web. It's all fairly available. Anyone can interact and write extensions and write for it. So unlike vendor-specific software, which is locked away and some bits are opened up through APIs, the full caboodle is online. What does that mean though? IFC for Dummies is basically a bit of a surety from anyone who's engaging in a project and most importantly owning the project at the end, is that software can always be read and interacted with something at some time, because they've got the key as well as the safe. I just made that analogy up, but we'll work with it. Whereas a lot of times if you're vendor specific, you've got the data, but you can't do much without using the vendor software. So there's that a lot of some of the larger corporations and governments especially have with that sort of approach. So it's about open systems, it's about having a system that you can work with in the future. It's platform independent, and it's especially a platform being both BIM platform and Macintosh and PC and Unix and all that sort of stuff as well. Interesting enough, and I won't play this video, but for those of you who know this guy, who looks a bit like a cross between Dave Allen and for those of you who know Dave Allen, this is a video that you should look up on the web and download and have a look at. It's from 1992 or something along those lines. And it's about Autodesk being one of the proponents of IFC in the beginning. So that's a pretty interesting sort of history note
or historical note. Back in the day when they had the old logo, they were very keen to see IFC, and certainly some of the guys I actually work with since in New Forma were part of that initial group that got these standards sort of set up. It then went on for historical reasons, mainly because of Autodesk being a sales company primarily. They weren't really supportive of the old IFC movement, which is a bit sad, but they've come back to it. This is a slide deck that Colin and I have presented with before, and certainly looking a little bit of this, what is it, hype curve, or hype cycle. And BIM is one of the things that's obviously very hyped, and certainly the idea of people being very excited by BIM and then it's falling off because people get into it, start using it, going, oh well, maybe it's not this fantastic. Then it sort of peaks up as people start to engage in it and use it properly and understand all the good and the bad. Now, where do you think we are on that particular cycle, Sam?
I think we're close to way past the trough, I hope.
We're getting
up in the productivity section.
So it means that once you start getting acceptance of these technologies, then other things start coming into play, like other ways of collaborating and other technologies and support systems, I guess, for BIM. So there's many ways of tackling this, and BCF, luckily, is one of them. What is BCF? So BCF is part, I guess, of the IFC. I'm just trying to get ahead here. I'll come back in a second. Before we go into BCF in particular, IFC 4. So IFC is a ISO certified standard and a platform which now a lot of the vendors are starting to support. It's just been released as IFC 4, not that you'll come across that anytime soon, although John's tools now address IFC 4. And it allows for a lot more of the sort of parametric NURB type shapes. It sort of makes up for a lot of the reasons why people were a bit disillusioned with IFC 4 or IFC originally, especially because if you just do a standard export out of Revit, IFC can look a bit average sometimes. But that's to do with the tool, not so much the platform. IFC 4 has the potential of really being where this will take off in a big way, because it has a lot more of the tools and techniques that people have been asking for in a BIM type process. It has a lot more ability to use parametrics and a lot more like families and components and things where people might have thought that the IFC workflow was a bit limited. And of course, one thing we should be mentioning is that IFC is only as good as the exporter you use to create it. So Autodesk themselves realise this. They probably have almost like a once a month update of their IFC exporter. You should sign up for that and make sure if you are starting to use IFC in your workflow, make sure you've got the latest exporter. And then you've got tools around like Solibri and a few other tools and Tekla BIM site. And I'll go into a list in a second of all the tools that will support IFC as well. But one of the things of IFC 4, or one of the things that they've realised, is that this whole idea of how you communicate issues with, not so much issues as in issues of versions, but problems you find within this collaborative workflow is how do you get that problem identified, captured and sent on to the other person who might be in the next office, might be in the next consultancy group, might be somewhere else around the world, of the particular aspect of that particular model, given that these models are dispersed, and given that in some cases it's a very visual thing you're trying to communicate, not like a traditional markup or clouded printed document. We're trying to obviously avoid that. Now, some people have been trying to use tools and have been using successfully tools like Navisworks. They've got a very good sort of clash detection tool, and there's a tool in there where you can actually communicate those things through like an animation. Solibri has a very similar thing as well. One of the problems with that approach, though, is that you've then got to download the latest model, you've got to put it into Navisworks, and you've got to then basically recreate what that person's seeing in the other office or in the other part of the country on your desktop as well, before you can actually figure out what they mean by there's a clash in a bulkhead or there's a problem with this services riser or something like that. What BCF is attempting to do, and doing it quite well, and Colin will go into a little bit more detail about how they are using it as a sort of a trial case, is it identifies the issue itself with a thing called a GUID. So every element inside Revit or any BIM product has a unique identifier to identify that this is a table and this is a monitor. And it's a unique code, usually a sequence of numbers. What it does is identify that particular component, takes a little screenshot, snapshot, and allows you to introduce some text and some instructions of what you think the issue is. And just that little, call it almost like a fax, just that little bit of the code is then sent back to the other person on the other end, and inside their tool, whether it be ArchiCAD or Revit or Solibri or Tekla, they can see that exact issue that you've been looking at. So you're not actually transmitting the model, you're just transmitting the instruction set and a couple of JPEGs, for want of a better word. Particularly clever because it means it's a very light form of communication, back and forwards. You're not downloading whole new models. Everyone's seeing everything at the same time, and you can also track it. So you've got instruction sets of who needs to work on it, and you can start using it like we would traditionally use a set of variations or a set of architecture instructions, but they're just BIM instructions as opposed to good old-fashioned drawing instructions. So that's where IFC4 has sort of adopted BCF as part of their tool set. So that's why it's in the sort of open BIM category, because part of the same people who are looking after IFC are also now sort of massaging BCF. And we'll go into how it's used and how it might work in tool sets like Revit as well. Now, just before we go into that, when you think of IFC, you might have just only ever seen the little exporter, which most of the time is hidden in Revit. You go into File, Export, and you have to keep scrolling before you even see IFC. I'm sure that's not on purpose. I'm sure that's just a mistake by Autodesk, but it's there. But these are the companies, and there's a lot of European ones that you might know, or you might not have heard of, so just assume they're European, who also work in IFC. So the whole NEMS-check range is IFC. Our friends at Bentley, Revit's in there as well. DDS, which you might have heard of it, it's equivalent to, say, Revit MEP. Allplan, Skia, quite a lot. Which means this is just pretty important stuff, because BCF theoretically can work with all of these as a way of transferring these issues and coordination discussions between the model sets, and independent of whether they've got it's a Mac or a PC or whatever, as I said. So pretty exciting. There's a list that grows as well. These are viewers, and I think I'll talk about a BCF view as well.
About 150 plus products supported.
Now, the reason I've got a Solibri shot in here is because both Solibri and Tekla, who Tekla is now owned by Trimble, designed this format for them to work together. Now, they're both Northern European programs. It was pretty easy for them to put their heads together and say, well, how am I going to get something I find in Solibri back to the guys who made the mistake or need to sort something out back in Tekla. So they came up with this file format. And because they use IFC primarily as their exchange format, it was quite easy for them to do that. What's happened now is that it's grown into a tool which others can take on, as this whole open source idea. And so we'll show some examples and more importantly, some free examples of how you can start using this in your system as well. So Solibri is one tool that it only is IFC. It interrogates models. You can do a whole lot of searching and I guess validation of models through the system. But one of the things you can also do is find issues and mistakes. So if I found this issue in Solibri and thought, well, actually, we've got toilets there, but we've got no hand basins, because I've done a search for all non-compliant bathroom fit-outs, and I've made a rule set, which is I want a bathroom to have toilets, basins, and something else. Found these two rooms that we're missing the basin.
Hang on a sec, can I just jump in
there?
there?
Go for it.
Just give you a little Solibri background.
Do it.
As Matt said, Solibri is all IFC, so it takes IFC from anywhere, obviously Revit, ArchiCAD, and all the Tekla, and so on. It runs, it does a clash detect, but it does more than clash detect. It does deficiency detection. So it's looking, based on rules, it's looking for stuff that's missing. So for example, if it finds a beam and it says, where's the column? That kind of logic is built into it. And not only that, it also can work with spaces, and consequently can also do code compliance. So it can check your escape distances, it can check disabled access requirements. Good on you. And that sort of thing. But one of the key things that I like about it is this little guy here called, I don't know if you can read it from there, but it's basically a results summary, and it shows it what they call issue density. And basically what they're showing there is how many clashes per 1,000 square meters of floor area has it found. And that, as an architect, is brilliant, or as a person doing the clash detection, because when I get a bunch of models from the services guys, and I've got over it, I've got an image density of 1 or more, they're getting the model back before I even look at it, because I'm wasting my time. And that's the best thing I've found for it. So it gives you a really good instant heads up, how good is or bad is this model? Do I waste my time trying to actually write up all these issues to publish in BCF back to them, or do I just say, no, go away, come back with a better model? And that happens 9 times out of 10.
So
It's a nice little starting point. Back to you.
what Solibri then did with Tekla is, okay, I've found this particular room, it's got a particular issue, I want to then tell, in the case of Tekla it's still detailing, so it's not a great example, but I want someone with another tool to know where I'm looking at and what I'm seeing. So that's where the tool will take now, through a model view definition, it will take the elements and it'll basically package it up a little bit like a GPS coordinate and say, right, over in whatever tool you've got, have a look at this room and have a look at these notes that I've assigned to it as well. Yeah, a simple premise. Getting quite exciting because this is a way that you can now communicate these particular issues straight back to the model creator. So there's a couple of animations I'll show in a second, but basically, and this will be available as a bit more of a condensed version online, but collaboration by Tekla, DDS, and DDS I should say, so the three of them were involved. There's a screenshot of one of the viewers at the moment where you've got the actual snapshot of what he's seeing, the issues that he's identified, and he's going to send that across to well, anyone in the team, I guess. As I said, it's now part of the Building Smart ISG, which is the same people who are looking after the IFC format. It got ratified this year, which is very good. And it's an encoded message to communicate between one BIM model and BIM model. That's another fluffy kitten. One platform to another. And the result of this schema, that's the most important thing, the only defined issues and not the entire BIM is needed to be communicated between software platforms. So very efficient. And you can see here in this particular screenshot example that you've got the issue that's been found. These are all done in headings. A bit of instruction set, which one, minimum room height, these are the issues that are found. It gets packaged up and sent back. You can have a BCF viewer, but predominantly what happens is you view it within the tool that you've created the model in to begin with.
So what you're doing is gathering all of the clashes together into an issue, or clashes or deficiencies, and you flag that as an issue which may have 20, 30, 40 clashes tied to it, one pipe going through 20 walls, kind of thing. And then that issue then becomes an item in the BCF.
And I remember now what I was trying to say before, is it's not, and you picked yourself up as well, it's not just clashes. So some of the tools that you might be very familiar with model integration and model review, are mainly just looking for clashes. They're looking for elements that coordinate or connect with other elements. What Solibri and some other tools do, which probably are a little bit more more appropriate to architecture, is looking for the absence of things that aren't complying with a set of rules that you might have predetermined. You might have said, I can't have one of these types of rooms any more than 20 metres from this type of room, and suddenly it's doing a check and saying, well, you're over that. So a lot more than just clashes can affect the design and use of a building. In fact, clashes, what they say is the low-hanging fruit. Everyone should be doing clash. That's easy.
I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a package nowadays that doesn't claim to do clash, and but none of them do deficiency.
So let's have a bit of a look. Now, this one I was promising to show Colin before, but he's seeing it live for the first time. Matteo Cometti, great name because he's Italian, and obviously that's the Italian version of Matt. As a
Is that what it means?
Absolutely. As his research project, he's developed a free plugin just for Revit, but that's a good start. And I'll play the little, not that little actually, the little video that he presented on that.
While you're looking for that, the plugins are available from a number of sources. Oh, there it goes. I'll leave it to
Oh yeah, I think he's I might play it again with the sound off and I'll show you the actual bit, a bit slower. communication is starting to occur.
Here with Renzo.
Sorry?
Here with Renzo piano.
Oh.
It's actually part of the Renzo piano studio workshop.
That would make sense, actually, yes. So there, I guess, is the killer, where he's found, there's a report that's been sent from Solibri, in this case that's the model aggregation tool. So the Solibri person's found an issue, he's opened up the communication format, the BCF, and it's taken him straight to that particular view with only those elements showing, because the BCF format understands what was in that view to begin with, and now he's found the exact same view within the Revit program. So that's a very slick one, and also his music choice is pretty good, you say. And it's probably the most recent of the BCF tools around. There's another one by a company called CAD Image, and I'll just show you their website for their version. There's no animation for that one, but I can show it from the website, which is currently live. And one of the original ones, so the Solibri tool and Tekla tool have this built in. So for them, this is no big deal. This is how people have been working for the last 2-4 years. But for the other tools, it's becoming a big deal. So if I just go, sorry.
And the word on the street is that, okay, we're using plugins to do it now, but it's not very far off that those tools will have it built into their standard feature set.
That'd be very nice. I mean, in the case of one of our American vendor friends, that would then go against, you wouldn't need to use their Navisworks and all the other things, so that might be a bit down the track. But other more open people may build that straight in, exactly. So here's a link to the bcf.cadimage.com page. Now they actually have a trial version that's available, but I think the limitation is on the amount of issues you can use. Have you used the trial one? Or
I haven't used the trial, no.
Okay.
I used the full version because it came with Solibri for us, but...
And on this website, there is, under features, I think, there is some... now, the good thing about the CAD image version is it's both Mac and PC. These guys, they're the Graphisoft reseller in New Zealand. They support both Mac and PC. And so their particular BCF viewer, it's a paid-for service, or paid-for plugin, but it's both Mac and PC, as you see from the screenshots. So if you are using, say, Vectorworks in Perth, or the ArchiCAD on a PC, on a Mac, you can use their plugin for both Revit. And so really getting this not just cross-platform, cross technology device as well. Now I just saw the pricing. So pricing there for them is a bit steep, but if you can think of the workflow advantages for this and not having to go through, say, well, I guess it's a good and a bad. You're not having to go through some sort of BIM guru manager who's the only one who knows how to open Navisworks and do all these reports. You're basically just communicating from model guy to model guy or model girl, from the structural person to the MEP person back and forwards, without this whole interface of a guru like Colin. Because you'd like these, in your case, I'll get you in a second, this should be done by model person, not through these other conduits really. And the last one I'm going to show is probably one of the original viewers, which is actually from a Norwegian company called CADQ. Now CADQ have just gone through an acquisition, and so now they're owned by the Adnode group, and it's incredibly impossible to find anything about their tool. But they do have a YouTube of the tool, and I'll just play that very quickly now.
What more do you want?
One of the biggest challenges we experience in BIM projects is poor communication between the participants in the projects. CADQ has now, in conjunction with Solibri, developed a methodology and technology that enables seamless flow of information. We will now show you how we communicate the information from Revit to Solibri, use Solibri for analysis and control, and then communicate the results directly back into Revit.
I'll speed this one up because it's very similar to obviously Matt's, but as far as when the interface starts up, it's about... So they're just showing how they're using Solibri to find the issues and find either the clashes or the things that are missing. And we get about halfway through the presentation and they finally get to Revit, which is about... Here we go.
She looks worried.
I don't think English is her first language. She's doing better than my Norwegian. Okay, here we go.
Too many clashes.
So, I just wanted to show you that screenshot. So let's start. Okay. So you can see on their toolbar, similar to how Matt does it, add-ins, they've got a whole series of tools, but one of them in particular is their BCF tool, which is right down here. And they're opening and exporting that sort of the data set. And it's being then shown live in the model.
Is this a paid one?
Yeah. This is the one that HOK were going to buy.
They're using the Solibri view engine, I think.
Well, this is actually a
screen grab, is it?
Well, it's a big map. So whatever tool you've used, you'll see that as part of that transmission. So different people can have different ways of how you sort of interact with it, but inherently it's going to be, and those of you budding software engineers back of the room somewhere, you can probably make a better looking one. But yeah, you're just basically listing the issues, you're listing the views that have been captured, and you're navigating to where that is, and you're setting up a communication back and forwards. So it could be like a chat board, it could be like a Twitter stream, it could be whatever. And if it was linking into something like your HR system and you already had your staff names propagated, that'd be huge. If it was linking to Union Square and you could see people on your team, all that sort of stuff.
So do you store all those messages?
It doesn't have a server as such, it doesn't need that. But basically it's going back and forwards through a zip file, and that zip file is progressively, as the issue gets sorted, it's no longer in that system, but I'd be suggesting you keep those zip files as records of, yeah.
The file format is actually XML, and apparently it's really simple. It took the guys at CADimage to write the Revit version 2 weeks.
But Revit's so easy, I mean, just ask Mr. Spot. No, it's because they'd already done it for the ArchiCAD version, that the Revit one was pretty easy.
Yeah.
I'll stop that there.
Does it require that both models, if it's only sending a limited amount of information about the model, does it require the models to be in sync?
No. It only requires that the models, that the GUID identification of the ID of the element stays.
Yeah.
So if you, for example, find something wrong in a model and then you send a BCF file back, but the original model that it came from, the guys have deleted that element, it's going to not know where to find it. It's going to defend there, can't find it.
And that's going to be the same with anything you use, even like a Navisworks is.
Yeah.
If that element for some reason has been deleted and replaced, a lot of times this happens when people are moving walls, they might just delete it and put a new wall in as opposed to moving. There has to be some sort of process and workflow as to how you make those changes. But it doesn't have to be the same version, which is a good thing, you know, again, a benefit of people wanting to know what the latest version of the model is. Well, sometimes no one really knows in some cases, because there's bits of this which is good and bits of that which is updated. Hence why this whole idea, I mean, Mr. Dibb might argue with me about the whole idea of a BIM server and a one-stop live model, because I know ArchiCAD have got a pretty good idea of it. but inherently you can't ever work on the one model at the same time all the time, mostly, sort of.
Not across multiple disciplines, because everyone's got a different idea of what they need to do, different tools for you going strictly open BIM.
And this is a presentation, a live one that was recorded onto a system called Prezi by Zach Cron out of HOK. They've been doing a lot of work with both Solibri and BCF, and at this stage using the CAD-Q tool. And basically this is another way of showing how they would use it in Anger. But while that's playing, which is, I think it's fairly... so it's Solibri through to BCF through to Revit.
What's good about this one is it actually shows the guy fixing the problem and then seeing what it looks like back when you check it again. So you go through the whole cycle, you tell the guy the problem, and he fixes it, and then he sends you back the answer to say, yeah, I've done it, but he also sends us associated model back with it. And when you run that back into Solibri, the walls that clashed now move apart, and then you can check it off, but it's recorded as being done.
So the reason, apart from being one of the committee members, the reason I got Colin to help with this is he's actually using BCF in a real project in Anger, using it with mostly Revit-focused firms over in Melbourne, and you've introduced BCF into that workflow for some of them? Sort of. Do you want to say a bit about that?
Yeah,
process?
the problem is getting them to pay for it. I mean, it's bad enough trying to get Revit guys to do IFC at all, as you know, and that's not being nasty, it's just hard. But then to make them, say to them, yes, but you've also got to go and spend $1,500 on a plugin so I can tell you you've messed up your model. It's not a really good combo. So it's not easy, that part of it. Hence, I'm quite attracted to seeing the free one.
Yeah, it looks good.
No loyalty to Solibri there. Yeah, look, I mean, we've been using it, I've been using it for a while, and we've been using it internally mainly to start off with. So we use Solibri internally to quality control our own models from a modelling team, because we're building models of a very high standard for use in the construction 445D area, and the whole game has to be lifted significantly to get that right. So we use it, as I said, within the team, and what I do is I run the check through and then generate a report to my modelling team to make sure they are picking up the stuff that needs to be sorted out. A bit less successful getting the others to get involved in BCF, and I won't claim to say that it's actually working yet, but it's a no-brainer in my opinion, because it's the first time you can talk to anybody in any other platform, and they can talk back to you. And the guys that are getting it are about to get going on it. I think ACOM are looking pretty strong on that area.
Well, the good thing about them is because they're Revit Windows, that's Matteo's tool. So that's
I mean, I suspect that having to pay for it's going to disappear pretty quickly, because when there's so many free versions out there, it's all over, guys. And it really is a very simple piece of software. It's not rocket science at all. John could knock us up one overnight, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Or it might, it could be an extension of a tool set that, again, I mentioned Union Square because they're a sponsor, but they're doing a lot of that issuing and architects' instructions work through their tool set. So they're a practice management portal. They could easily do a sort of side issue into BCF, and that could be part of their workflow. As you said, it could be part of just the normal tool sets. And it could also link through to something like an Aconex. And so the Aconex has the issues that have been found through the BCFs, and there's a record kept there as well. So everyone has a part to play, really.
Mm. Yeah, on the project we've actually got a document type called BCF set up in Aconex to send it around, but usage is a bit patchy at this stage. But yeah, that's...
So is there any, I mean, where are we on time?
Sorry, I think I should just clarify one thing about the relationship between IFC and BCF.
Go for it, yes.
Well, the first relationship is primarily one of who's looking after it, and that's the Building Smart. There's no code connection between the two at all. The main connection between IFC and BCF is traditional from the fact that Solibri and others have been so involved in that process, and they work purely in IFC. It is quite conceivable that you could use that in Revit and send that query to a guy in ArchiCAD without even doing IFC. It's potentially possible. So whilst there's this, we've given you the whole spiel about IFC, it actually isn't totally dependent on each other. But that sort of open standard concept is part of the IFC philosophy, but it's not actually technically connected.
Very good point. So there's nothing stopping. I mean, it's not going through an IFC server. It's not going through anything else. In fact, you've seen Solibri there a lot because that's used as a sort of a third-party model aggregator. But it could just be it could be an issue. Well, in fact, it could be a Revit architecture to Revit structure. Quite simply.
Oh, Revit to Revit.
Yeah.
Revit architecture, Revit architecture. If you want to.
If you're working with collaboration, perhaps you're working on a JV, and they're always fun, and you want to, tell someone off because of what they've done to their bit of the model. BCF could track all that, give them the snapshot, save you opening up a go-to meeting, all that sort of gear. It's just issue to issue anywhere in the model.
And we look forward to when it's a default feature of our BIM platforms, we don't have to plug it in.
Exactly, and maintain it and look for the next version and all those sort of things.
And the standard is fairly simplistic at the moment. There's definitely room for additional stuff in it, and we've already logged some stuff with the guys that are developing the standard where it doesn't, for example, Solibri does a really good job of creating issue identification IDs. So each issue's got a stamped ID that you can't get rid of, in fact. So it travels with it always, but BCF doesn't carry it yet.
Right.
That's the key. So they know about it, and apparently it's been looked at. Questions, I guess?
Are we going through to 3? I should know this, but I don't.
I don't.
Let me go back.
Yes.
I think you're going to 5.2 according to the...
Okay, fine. Well, in that case, then what I'm going to do is I've got Revit here with the older version of the BCF plugin, and I'm happy to show some screenshots, although I don't really have a model here we can use in real anger. And unfortunately, this laptop is not the best. You can see there's probably... And for all you IT people in the room, don't treat your desktop like this. It's just what happens when you've got a billion things to organise. And there was something else Revit plugin-wise I was going to say. BCF. Oh, Kobe-wise. And again, there's a confusion between Kobe and IFC. Again, same sort of mandate, trying to be an open sort of exchange of information. But you can do Kobe without IFC, and obviously you can do IFC without Kobe, and they don't inform each other, unfortunately.
There's a pretty clean relationship between IFC and Kobe in the sense that you can you can convert IFC to Kobe for handover for 60 for FM quite cleanly and easily. But as Matt pointed out, you can do it without the IFC directly from Revit with the new toolkit, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
And pretty cleanly too. I see they were top scorers in the test.
A controversial scoring system, but yes, they did well.
But the Kobe standard as a standard is being looked after also by Building Smart, so they're kind of looking after all these open standards for our industry.
Whilst this is probably going to take a while to open up, John, you've worked a little bit with the IFC and issues and identifying. So can you explain how the IFC actually handles that? Is that what is informing BCF?
Yeah, hang on, you mean issues in the standard or issues in...
Oh, so if you issue within a model, so you're transferring those, finding those elements or those MVDs.
Yeah, so as I understand the BCF, you pretty much explained as I understand it.
Right, okay. So you're
setting a subset of the model using unique identifiers so that across platforms, across different software, the element can be recognised.
Yep.
That's the key. As long as the element retains its GUID, it's going to be connected. So I told you it was going to be hard to talk about BCF for 40 minutes.
Oh, no, come on.
You can show the end of Babel.
I could just show... How about I show Babel?
It's worth a laugh.
Here we go.
Better than watching Revit start.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so Babel... Oh, yeah, you just got to see it to believe it.
One of the guys that commented on this video when it was posted on a website, a blog somewhere, was one of the guys that was originally employed by Autodesk to work on IFC originally. And he explained the history of why it went into that 18-year down spiral for a bit when it got all crazy. And it was because of a lack of trust between the vendors, basically. But Autodesk owned the actual foundation class and they were prepared to share it, but no one trusted them.
this will fill. Yeah.
It's a good description of IFC and BCF.
This, you can tell this is done by an American marketing team. They've put a lot of effort into it, lots of good camera angles and interviews. Whereas currently the IFC crowd, they just put up sort of release notes and they don't do much. But there's a gloss versus the goods versus the gloss.
Hollywood BIM.
Hollywood BIM.
One of the biggest construction projects ever undertaken, designed to reach the level. And the engineers couldn't finish the job. Halfway through, everybody working on the tower was stricken with the inability to understand what the other fellow was saying. They were all still talking, but they weren't communicating. That incident is supposed to have taken place in about 5000 BC, and we've been trying to understand one another ever since. But not too long ago, thanks to technology, there came along an amazing invention that actually made this problem worse. What is it? The desktop computer, of course.
With a floppy drive.
Everybody's got one of these things today, and we've all set about automating every task we can think of. On a project like this one, for example, the designers have automated their drawing production, and the structural engineers have automated their calculations for determining the size of members, and the HVAC people have automated their calculation for thermal performance. But they're still not really communicating. You see, we haven't improved the processes that connect these tasks together. And that's because the software packages that make this computer do its job are made by hundreds of different companies. And each software program has its own way of defining terms for the computer to understand. So they all talk to the computer, but they don't talk to each other, which means the people who use them can't do a very good job of talking to one another either, at least not with their data files and electronic drawings and documents. And why is that a problem? Well, on a big project like this office building, for example, our fractured information system, this one we're all using, results in information that's often incompatible, inconsistent, or redundant. You can imagine what something like that adds to the cost of something like this. When you come right down to it, we're all wasting a lot of time. For example, an architect does an initial design and passes it off to the structural and HVAC engineers. Now, they all work in parallel, isolated, making changes as they see fit. When they get back together to try to integrate all of their decisions, well, the results are something of a mess. It takes iteration after iteration to finally get it right. But there's a move afoot to change all that, to make all of the software packages talk to each other, to make them all operate from a single shared building model that provides a common language for defining a building project, kind of a universal compatibility. It's being spearheaded by a company called Autodesk in collaboration with industry partners such as AT&T, HOK Architects, Honeywell, Carrier, and Tishman Construction, to name a few.
The alliance was carefully put together. More than a dozen companies were all global players. And the important thing about the alliance is that it represents a cross-section of companies that deal across the cycle of the building industry. People who design, people who engineer buildings, people who build, manage, maintain, and then recycle buildings. We're all partners in this.
This is one of the most exciting things that I've seen happen in our industry in the 30 years that I've been in the industry. The design professionals, the manufacturers have come together and are putting in place an intelligent information system that is going to provide long-term benefits over the next decades.
I'll go to part 2 because it's got a few more good quotes. But you can see, so yeah, it really was an Autodesk invention.
Okay, sounds like a good idea. So you've probably got just 2 questions. How much will this cost me, and when can I get a hold of it? Well, it's not likely to cost very much.
At least 30 years.
If indeed it ever costs you anything. The expense for the project is part of the research and development budgets of the corporations who are participating. The end result will simply be a new foundation within the software you buy. It will likely first appear as a feature of your next upgrade for AutoCAD-based applications. Then you'll find it in a growing number of non-CAD applications that can add information to the shared building model. It's easy to implement, so you're not looking at much for transition costs. There's no special hardware or peripherals or add-on software to purchase. In other words, it's more or less free, which is a pretty fair price for everything this project delivers, wouldn't you say? And now, when can you get your hands on it? Finished applications are still a few months away, but prototypes are already up and running. You can see them today at an Autodesk demonstration.
2D, huh?
Oh yeah.
Just for a minute, imagine with me what these new tools will mean for you. First, your drawings will no longer simply be lines, arcs and circles. They will be assemblies of objects with the intelligence to be doors, windows and walls. Next, the objects will be understood as doors, windows and walls by all of your software packages. Then the objects will understand how they relate to one another.
The new one.
So the window will know the rules for inserting itself into a wall. Finally, these objects will have gathered intelligence from the creative people, like you, who work with them. So they'll know about building codes and budgets, and they'll behave accordingly. Which results in an unlimited ability for you to work in concert with all the teams on a project throughout the building's life cycle, to create information once and share it easily with whomever needs it.
The big idea behind interoperability is that finally we can have an integration of the entire design, build, maintain, operate industry.
So a bit more history. This guy from Hock, Patrick O'Meany or something, I didn't quite catch his name. He actually is still involved in IFC. He actually chaired the committee that saw IFC go to certification, ISO certification for IFC 4. So he's still around 25 years later doing it. So Hock are very serious about IFC, even though they're very
yeah, you might have heard of Schusler? Greg Schlusner, sorry. Apologies, Greg. Zach Cron, as I mentioned before. These are sort of the underlings now of Patrick, but equally as involved. Greg runs, I think he's part of Smart Geometry Group in the US as well. So HOK, yeah, as Colin said, keep on trying to pedal the good oil. Interestingly, they moved across to Revit, and so that didn't. Although they're interoperability people, and I think that move would have actually spurred on Autodesk somewhat, which was good. And yeah, and this promotional video was basically talking about what has then become BIM and IFC, and obviously there's elements of this which this is before obviously BIM was a term because no one's mentioned it so far. And then there was a bit of hiatus where, as we mentioned before, the Europeans sort of took it on in earnest, and the Americans are trying to catch up again. So YouTube, Tower of Babel, there are a couple of other cool little comments, and of course the imagery of the Windows, I think it was even 3, not 3.1 CAD system, which obviously Mr. Goodman is probably the only one in the room who's used.
I use Windows 2, mate.
You use Windows 2? Oh, okay.
There's a runtime for Excel.
And luckily, you've both been practicing long enough for his Tower of Babel to almost come to fruition.
The whole operating system fit on a 3.5-inch floppy. Windows and Excel together.
So we're going to probably wrap it up there. If you've got any outstanding questions, actually I'll swap back to the website, because what I've done in the meantime, and we'll probably do this for the other talks when we get around to it, is if you go at this stage to the talk name, when it fires back up online. So if you're really interested in seeing more about it straight away, there's some links to those viewers. I'm not sure what I've done to that one, but I'll fix it up. And Zach Cron's presentation, which goes through the entire way HOK using IFC, and a bit of the history there. And then we'll add to that as we go and get people's presentations and things rolling in.
Zach's one's quite good because it's more than just BCF and IFC. It's all the whole range of tools they use. They use a really broad range of tools, and they all interoperate with each other through IFC.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Colin. Excellent presentation.